Hey guys and girls, before we start this week's video, I want to give a big shout out to our friends at Best of the Best, or BOTB. BOTB are a competition company that give away dream cars every single week. They've just opened up a new lifestyle competition where you can win a host of cool gadgets like a Supernova Extreme Overclocked PC, gaming bundles, TVs, drones, iPhones, and even a crazy Spitfire experience. Tickets start at just 15 pence. You only have to be 16 years of age or over to enter, and the competition is open worldwide. I've linked two of my favourite prizes in the description below, so be sure to take a look. What's going on there, guys? My name is Matt, or Chewy as most of you will know me as, and welcome back to something new on the channel. We're testing something today. You see that we are on board the British Airways 777 today, flying Speedbird 15 from London Heathrow to Singapore. This is a real-life flight that British Airways operate, and once they land in Singapore, they turn around the aircraft and head to Sydney afterwards. We're currently on the Arama 1 Bravo arrival for runway 20 right. As you can see, we're flying offline from ImagineSim today, and we're in a Golf Sierra Tango Bravo Hotel, which is a British Airways 777-300ER today. We're just about to go through transition level, so you'll see me set the altimeters in a moment after almost 12 and a half hours of flying. So what is this video all about? Well, I decided on my live stream earlier on this week that I wanted to fly this Speedbird 15 flight. And so what we did is we took off from London Heathrow late in the evening on Tuesday, I believe it was, Tuesday evening, and I was landing into Singapore the following morning at about 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock UK time, which is again 0900 Zulu, and it's not a very pretty sight for my viewers to see me at that time of the morning. I'm not a very good morning person, so instead of live streaming the arrival into Singapore, I actually recorded it so that I could show them the replay of it on my live stream. And when I did that, it made me think of an idea to actually record some approaches for you guys and record some different stages of flight, and actually upload it to my YouTube video and do a little commentary over the top of it after it's been done. Recently, my YouTube channel has just consisted of live stream highlights where I'm not really talking to you, the actual viewers on YouTube. It's usually me talking to my Twitch chat and then just uploading the highlight. So we're trying something different. I would love to know your feedback as to whether you would like this to continue and whether you would like this to be a little bit of a series potentially that I could do every now and again, where I do a dedicated arrival or I do a dedicated departure and don't stream it, but just record it and upload it for YouTube for you guys. I'm sure there'll also be questions about whether I will be doing more full flight videos on the YouTube channel as well. All I will say for now is stay tuned. So, enough rambling on at the start. Let's get into the arrival. As I say, we're on the Arama 1 Bravo today, which is a really lovely arrival. It takes you right the way to the south of the airport and then around to the east. Obviously, we're coming in from the west, coming in from London Heathrow direction where we started, and then all the way back round to the north to land on runway 20 right, which was the active runway at the time of arrival. It actually did switch to the 02 runways not too long after I landed. So you can see we've got this absolutely stunning approach right now. We're just about to go through 10,000 feet. I'm getting an FMC warning for drag being required. And the reason why we're getting that is because, as you may be able to see on my primary flight display, the speed that the aircraft wants us to hit is 220 knots indicated, and we're above that by over 10 knots at 230. I'm having a quick look on the charts here just to double check to see what the go-around altitude is and to make sure that I'm happy with the approach. So through 10,000 feet we go. The passenger signs are on. We had good braking conditions, so I've selected only auto brake 2. It's a very long runway at Singapore, and so you don't really need too much crazy braking action. Idle reverse and auto brakes 2 in good weather conditions will do you well. Checking the star now, and as you'll see, I accidentally select the wrong star. That would be an arrival for the 02 left or 02 center runway, but as I say, we're on the 1 Bravo today, so there we go. I eventually realized it. And having a look at the following waypoints. Dovan, we've got a restriction at 4,000, and then Bipop, we've got to be at 190 knots. There's a restriction there. Now, if you have a look at my navigation display, those of you who are eagle-eyed will realize that at Bipop, what we're supposed to be doing then, what would happen in real life is that you would get radar vectors from air traffic control onto the approach. I was lazy though and just took myself from BIPOP and then entered in a direct to IDVAS, which is one of the points on the arrival. So it just made it easier. Instead of having to self-vector onto final, we just put a direct in, and then the aircraft can control itself from LNAV and pick up the localizer frequency once it turns onto final. It didn't really matter too much that I was keeping my speed above 220 knots. Again, we're flying offline, we're not disturbing any other traffic, and it's nice to get in quickly, even though under normal circumstances I really should have been paying attention to the speed restrictions there with that 220 knots, which I mentioned earlier on. We will bring the speed back to try and reach that 190 knot restriction that I very quickly mentioned at BIPOP. Another thing to note that I've done on the aircraft, on the navigation displays, I've put some range rings in. I always like to put some range rings in for the approach, usually a 5 DME, a 10 DME and a 15 DME range ring, and then also an extended center line as well if needed. Scenery that's in use today is Orbex Global with Orbex trees and vector as well. There's no land class or anything on top of that, and I have to say I'm really loving the way that the sim looks around Singapore. It is beautiful. Airport scenery, as I may have mentioned but already forgotten about earlier, is the new ImagineSim Singapore scenery, which is very, very, very nice indeed. One of my favourites. So matching up our heading, which is always a good thing to do on the aircraft. On the Boeing's always good to keep your heading matched up. So therefore, if air traffic control told you to remain on present heading, you'd be able to tell them what heading you're on straight away, and you wouldn't have any issues going to heading select. And it's just good practice to do so, really. Of course, the G90s are engines of choice today, and there you go, you'll see we now select flaps 1 on the aircraft to help bring that speed back. I usually select 1 at about 20 miles to run or so, flaps 5 at about 15 miles. It depends on different airlines and different aircraft, and each airline will kind of specify when is a good point to bring flaps down and at what speed. I believe Ryanair on their 737s, in fact, only take gear down at about 5 miles or about 2,000 feet above the runway, which is pretty crazy, but well, that's Ryanair for you. So flaps 1, we're still keeping a visual with the airport, which is now off to our left-hand side still, descending through 5,700 feet, and all is looking steady so far. We're happy with our speed, we're happy with our altitude, and just look at this view from the left wing. A river down to our left-hand side, lots of vegetation everywhere. Again, this is just the real base Orbex with vector and trees in there as well. No land class doing any fancy work there as well. Another thing to note on the primary flight display, we've got the localizer, which is now alive for us. And one thing that is always really good to check when you're doing an ILS approach is which side of your primary flight display that localizer, that white magenta diamond at the bottom of the vertical horizon that you see is on. So when you're approaching an airport and you're going to be doing a left-hand turn to establish yourself on final, you obviously would like the magenta diamond to be on the right-hand side of your primary flight display, and then as you make that left-hand turn in, it will move from the right to the center, and it's the complete opposite from if you're turning right onto final. You'd like the localizer, the magenta diamond, to be on the left-hand side, and then it moves in towards the center. So a little thing, but always something that helps out to just make sure that you are tracking the correct ILS frequency. Otherwise that would be very awkward if you establish on an incorrect runway. So here's that turn at BIPOP that I talked about, taking ourselves now direct to IDVAS. We've got to note that the cabin's ready, so popping that in our third FMC there to acknowledge that we know that the cabin is secure for the approach. Speeds move back to 190 knots, and you'll notice now that we've actually got that white diamond on the vertical display now for our glide slope. So I switch ourselves into vertical speed mode and go at 1,200 feet per minute, and that's just to increase our descent rate slightly, just so we can try and move ourselves below the glide slope. If you capture the glide slope from above the profile, you do risk a false capture, which I'm not going to go into explanation about what that is today. But you always want to try and establish yourself onto the glide slope from below the altitude. Another good bit of practice to do is to arm localizer first. It's again Highly recommended to capture the localizer before you capture the glide slope. Again, reasonings why I'll go into, I'm sure, another time. So what British Airways pilots do, and I'm sure a lot of other pilots will do, is they'll arm the localizer first and ensure they get established on the localizer, and then once they've got that mark, they'll then arm the approach phase, which can activate the glide slope. Autosave comes in, so that's why the video has suddenly stopped there for a second, and why we've got the blue circle of death, which always scares me every single time. But it's no problem. The sim didn't crash, which is nice. It's such a lovely view outside. It's very difficult to not look out the window here, but you've got to be monitoring your instruments, got to be keeping control of what's going on in the aircraft, and really being careful. On the navigation display, you can see that we're just crossing through that 10 nautical mile mark now. So we've reduced the speed to 160 knots, which is the flaps 15 bug. If you've been keeping an eye on that white diamond on the vertical display there on the on the PFD, you'll see that we're now below that glide slope profile. Lots of different things here, and I'm sure for people who are new to aviation, me talking about all of these different things are probably very, very confusing indeed. Landing lights coming on very late. Yes, I forgot them. It was 9 o'clock in the morning, and I'm not very good in the mornings, as I say. Localizer's been captured, and so we've now armed the approach, which will mean that we can capture the glide slope. Vertical speeds rolled back to 200 feet per minute as we turn on to final now, and you can see that the diamonds have now moved from white in color to magenta in color, and you'll see that horizontal one for the localizer has moved in towards the center now, and how perfect it is with the reading, because we've just turned on to final. Gear down and flaps 20 is the next call as we move forward in trying to get this beastly 777 300ER on the ground. On about a 7.5 to 6 mile final now or so. We're on the glide slope. We've reset our MCP altitude to 5,000 feet, which is the go-around altitude, and we've armed the speed brakes now. Our speed is still bugged to the flap 20 bug, and now we move it down to 5 knots above our VREF speed. We're landing with flaps 30 today, and that gave me a VREF speed of 146, so we add 5 on top of that, and we get 141 for the VREF, so we get a V approach 5 knots more of 146. Out to a wing view for the final flap setting coming down now as we select flaps 30 on about a 5 mile final. And all round a good fun approach with beautiful views, not having to worry about VATs and traffic or anything. Through 1,300 feet, landing checklist has been completed, so we can remove that from the lower ICAS display. And then in a moment, you'll see me take out the autopilot. We do leave the auto throttle in this aircraft. There are airlines who do take the auto throttle out, but I prefer on the 777 to leave the auto throttle in, but we do obviously take out the autopilot function as well. There we go, clicking the button on the yoke, autopilot disconnect, click it again, and that will remove the message from the upper ICAS display. And here we are, on final, winds are calm, speed is where we want it, and we are ready to land. Just on a very funny side note, those of you who will know my live streams know that I have a cat, a lilac Burmese cat called Timmy, who likes to make appearances on the stream and distract me as I'm flying. Whilst I was hand flying this approach, he was actually trying to get my attention, and he was nudging his head against my hand as I was trying to control the aircraft on the joystick, which was very interesting to try and do. I don't think any real-world pilots have ever had a cat trying to disrupt them from landing. No excuses, because I was happy with the landing, but just something funny that I thought I would know actually for this one. +100. Trying to keep ourselves on the center now. We're looking good with the height. We've got 2 white and 2 red lights on the PAPI lights, which indicates that we are perfectly on the profile, and we can see 20 right coming up on the numbers now, so we are indeed on the correct runway. 100. Through 100 feet radio, and at about 30 to 20 feet, the auto throttle will idle the throttles, we'll flare the aircraft, and then try and keep ourselves centered and touchdown in the touchdown zone, which I think I just about missed. Touchdown of the back wheels and a nice soft derotation on the nose will ensure that the speed brakes are up and that the reversers are normal. On the upper ICAS display, you can see REV there at the top of the N1 display, and it's in green, so that means that our reversers are in good operation. 70 knots and the auto brakes have been disengaged by the toe brakes now, so we're on manual braking, and through 60 knots you see the reverses get stowed there. And welcome down to Singapore, everybody. Swing the nose out to the right a bit. I don't know why I did that, to be honest. No reason to. I just did. And then we vacate to the left, and I believe it was Whiskey 7. Stand of choice today was Charlie 24, so we'll be making a left turn in a moment and making our way down to the terminal. But there we go. A nice arrival into Singapore. I bring up the display now so you can see where we're taxiing. The spoilers can come down and we can start to retract the flaps as well. A very, very, very fun approach. And as you can see, the scenery here at Singapore is absolutely stunning. If you've not got the ImagineSim Singapore scenery yet, I would highly recommend it. We waited a long time for the scenery to be released from the developers, and I do admit it was definitely worth the wait for sure. In the meantime, we've cleaned up the aircraft here. Flaps have gone up. Our auto brake has been disarmed. We turned off the flight directors and turned off the weather radar as well. Strobe light has come off, and all of our landing lights have come off as well. And we've just got the taxi light on now. Making a left turn from that Whiskey 7. What's the word that I'm thinking of here? Well, the Whiskey 7 exit point on the runway. My brain's fried. And we're on Whiskey Papa taxiway now, which we will taxi down until we can reach in towards the Charlie 24 stand that I mentioned very quickly earlier on. And one thing to note is that I actually really struggle with power in this aircraft when it comes to taxiing. I don't know why. I mean, usually I'm okay with it. But during this taxi, I was either going way, way, way too fast or way too slow. And I was really struggling with power inputs to try and find a nice speed. I don't really try and go over about 20 knots in a straight line. And when I'm doing a turn, I'd like to be at about 10 knots or so. But yeah, for some reason, I just really struggled with it. I'm not too sure why. There's no reasoning. I just struggled with it. So if you see me randomly stop or go way too fast, then you kind of know why. Erase all the fix info now on the navigation display, as we don't need that. And obviously a nice thing to do is another crew would come over and take control of this aircraft now once we landed at Singapore. As I mentioned earlier on, this flight does continue on to Sydney afterwards. So it's always good to, you know, leave the flight deck in a nice state, not only clean, take out your rubbish and stuff with you, which we don't have to worry about in our simulators, but also to you know, make sure that you've left the panel state in a good condition as well. I was the pilot who was flying the next leg, so of course I wanted to make sure that it was in a good stead for me, because if I'd left switches in the wrong position, well, that would have, you know, hurt me at a later point in time when we did the next flight to Sydney. If you would like to see the replays of the departure from London Heathrow, and if you want to see the flight from Singapore to Sydney, the videos on demand are available on my Twitch channel. I probably won't be uploading them here to YouTube, but if you go onto my Twitch page, which is linked down in the description, and if you go onto videos, then you should be able to see, if you just flick back through the videos from this past week, then you'll be able to see where they are. Of course, I'm saying this past week on the time of recording. If I get dates for you guys, I believe the departure from London Heathrow was on Tuesday the 20th of November, and then we flew from Singapore to Sydney on the 21st of November. If you are watching this video 2 months or so after this video has been released, then I don't believe those videos will be available anymore on Twitch, which is a bit of a shame, but hey. Auxiliary power unit, or more commonly known as the APU, is coming online now to provide power to the aircraft once we switch off the engines. And look, see, this is just terrible. I want to be at about 10 knots here to try and swing round to the right to go on to Whiskey 2, I think this is, and I just cannot get the power settings right. I'm at about 2 knots, which obviously is a complete and utter crawl, and the aircraft doesn't like it whatsoever. So I power up the aircraft and then make the turn and almost do it too quickly. So really struggling with the power settings, but hey-ho. Once again, just look at this airport. Absolutely beautiful. It's quite a large airport, and there's a lot to have been modelled. And considering the quality of the original ImagineSim Singapore scenery, they really have completely started again from the ground up, it seems. And they've revolutionised it. It was a long wait for this scenery to be released, but it was worth it, and I've been flying in and out of it a heck of a lot recently to celebrate its release. Right, almost there, as I can barely control the aircraft. It's a weird thing. I can land an aircraft relatively okay nowadays, and I think I do all right in most aspects of flying the aircraft somewhat, but taxiing and parking are definitely my weakest. Definitely my weakest, for sure. Don't ask me why. I've had enough practice now, so I've got no excuses. And look, this is another autosave. If you're wondering why you may get these autosaves sometimes and you get these massive glitches, and why I get these really large freezes, the reason being is that I only get these freezes with PMDG aircraft. And the reason why they freeze so much is that whenever PMDG saves a panel state, which is what the autosave does, it actually has 80 or so individual processes that it saves. So if you can imagine doing 80 individual saves on different processes, it's no wonder that it can freeze up the sim for a couple of seconds and leave it hanging there. It's only PMDG that do this, so that's why I only get these weird, you know, couple of second freezes in PMDG aircraft. I don't get it in anything else, because I don't believe they save as much. That's what I've been told anyway. I could be mistaken with that. Going to the tail cam now to cheat as we turn onto the stand. Once more, Charlie 24 was our stand, and we've got our GSX man there to help us out, so that we don't mess up the parking. Even though I feel like the GSX man usually doesn't have your parking interests in mind, and either gets you to taxi too far forward of the line or nowhere near it. So I usually just ignore the little man on the ladder there at the end. I'll be totally honest with you. Beautiful aircraft, absolutely stunning. I love the British Airways 777. I mean, I love British Airways as a whole, and I love 777s, but combine them and it's something else. It really is. Almost there now after a long trip, 12.5 hours of flight time. I'm sure the passengers couldn't wait to get off, especially when I was taxiing so terribly like this. But as I say, of course, you know, there's a couple of hours turnaround, and then the aircraft is straight back off again and off to Sydney. It then turns around once more and comes back from Sydney to Singapore, Speedbird 16, and then from Singapore to London Heathrow to complete its 4-sector journey from one side of the world to the other. So there we are. Parking brake is set. We look on the upper ICAS display, if I can speak, and the APU is running, so that indicates to us that we can turn the fuel control switches off, and we are safely on the ground in Singapore. I didn't record the full shutdown procedure and anything like that, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Something a little bit different from me. If you did enjoy it, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comment section what you thought and whether you'd like to see more of these types of videos. Very much appreciate you tuning in, and I will see you on the channel again soon.